Hi guys. So today I am going to do a podcast, I guess. I want to say a few things before I get right into the subject of the video, which you've probably guessed. I mean, the title is giving it away. I'm going to talk about relationships and I'm going to talk about one relationship in particular. But before I get into this, I just want to say I'm sorry if some of you do not really enjoy the podcast format. I'm very busy, I've been really busy. I've been moving, I've been going back to south of France, and I'm staying with my family, and it's hard and everything. I mean, there are so many different things. My camera has no battery. I need to find a tripod when I film. I need to find a good light. I need to find a decent background and everything. And quite frankly, I need to prepare classes, like full courses for September, because I'm going to teach literature and French to middle schoolers. On top of that, I need obviously to film videos. I need to post on Twitter. It's not that I need to, but I do my social media, and I also picked up my blog again, and I'm trying to spend time with my family and everything. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not going to stop making videos, and I do enjoy videos, but I have been finding podcasts really convenient and really practical and easier for me to do, so I've been doing a few podcasts in French, and I've done a podcast in English on my channel before. I actually recorded it when I was in Istanbul, and it was like a raw emotion, but in podcast form, and it was a positive one. So if you haven't listened to it, and if you would like to, there's going to be a link down below. So yes, that's basically just it. So don't worry, videos are not disappearing, but probably sometimes here and there are going to be podcasts, because it means that I will be able, if I can upload podcasts, to upload more regularly, because it's a lot more flexible and convenient for me. So in today's podcast, I want to talk about the relationship I had when I was 16 until I was 18. So I actually made this video in French a month ago or something like this. And I got such an overwhelming and positive feedback that I really wanted to share it with you as well in English, because a lot of people commented that they could relate, that it really helped them or comforted them or made them feel better just listening to someone having a similar experience. And I definitely think it's not something uncommon, so I kind of felt like it was perhaps an interesting and like a useful thing to share as well in English. So if you've been following me for a while, chances are you kind of know what I'm talking about, because I have hinted or touched on the subjects a few times. I have never made like a proper video about it, nor have I posted or anything about it like in depth and length, and that's not necessarily exactly what I'm going to do in this podcast either. But you might know that I am not really into relationships. And when I'm saying relationships, it's kind of confusing, because I haven't had like proper traditional relationships as you would think, like going out with someone, dating someone, that is. But I've obviously had relationships, as in I have met people that I felt attracted to. I have met people for whom I had tenderness. I have met people for whom I had love. I have met people for whom I had affection. For some of them, it lasted for a long time. Some of them, I never even told them I liked them. And I personally believe that there are so many different kinds of love. And so I honestly can say that, there has been a few people in my life that really mattered and that I had feelings for, but I don't think I've ever had the same type of love for any of them. And it's not to say like obviously you never love someone exactly like you love someone else. But what I'm saying is, for me personally, it's not that. It's just some of them, I love them in a full way, and that didn't need to be accomplished or actually done. Some of them, I just had tenderness for them. Some of them, it was a kind of passion perhaps that was also fueled by insecurities and doubts and questions that I had, and it lasted for a few months and led to a lot of sadness. Some of them it never led to sadness, even though sad things happen. So you get the idea. I just want to say I have a pretty complex and rich and like diverse understanding and experience of love and relationships. And I think it's very important for me to say that beforehand, because when I talk, about that with some people, I never really talk about my relationships, so to speak, because I feel like people don't really understand it most of the time, and they immediately think of like traditional relationships and dating people and then dating another person. And I don't fit, and I absolutely do not relate to that very simple and universal sort of like speech about love, when I think, well, love is obviously a thing that we all share, even if you have just platonic love or if you have friendship love. It's also very unique, and I have spent a lot of time exploring the unicity of the love that I feel, and I encourage anyone to do the same. And I feel like the reason why I did this introspection work is partly because of this relationship. It was my only proper and traditional dating someone relationship thing, and it was a disaster. And I want to talk about it because it's one of my biggest regrets, because it's one of the most unpleasant memory I have, and because I definitely think it shaped me in some ways. So when I was 16, I started dating a guy, and I dated him for like 2 years. And at that time, I really was not interested in dating anyone, partly because I was not interested in relationships. I was not interested in people that I would meet in my daily life. As I said in my French video, I've always been someone who really loves literature and art and beauty. And basically for me, listening to beautiful songs, reading amazing books, and seeing the beauty in its artistic form, but also seeing the love, like the love stories or the love whatever, and comparing it to real life, I always felt like real life was absolutely worthless, tasteless, and I just didn't understand, like, how could people actually enjoy those real life things when they knew what was going on in books and in movies and in songs. And that's why I was not really interested, and that's also because of my personality. I really am not someone who's into relationships. The third thing, I guess, was because I did have feelings for someone, and I'm going to talk about it in another video, maybe my first love, I guess. But he was not living in France, we were not dating or anything, so it was kind of like, for me, it was very real, but for other people, it was kind of unreal. So when this guy, who was a friend of friends, started like flirting with me and being very insistent, not in a negative and forceful and just, negative way, but like very much into me, I suppose you could say. All of my friends were like, you look so good together, you go so well together, your personalities would match so well, you should definitely go out with him and stuff. And honestly, it's so strange to think that 2 years of my life were actually conditioned by the insistence of a guy and the opinions of my friends, when actually for me, I was absolutely not interested. It wasn't that I hated him, it wasn't that I disliked him, it was just I didn't really care. I just really didn't care. But at that time, because I was young and because I wasn't, I was young, I was lacking experience, lacking a support system, I guess. I was like, it's okay to be different, it's okay that you don't want to be in a relationship or whatever. Also, all of the different things led to me not recognizing that the lack of interest was a sign for me to say no. So I started dating that guy, and it lasted for 2 years, which is quite a long time. And what's interesting in that is that, quite frankly, even though it lasted for 2 years, I never loved him. I gave the impression that I loved him because I was in a state of denial, I suppose you could say. I was like cut in half. Basically, I knew that I didn't love him. I knew that I was not happy in that relationship. I knew because I wasn't happy. I knew because I didn't want to see my life changed because of that. I knew because I didn't want other people to see us together. I knew because I didn't want to tell anyone that I was dating him. I knew because I was sometimes imagining someone else instead of him. I knew because I would cry and I have those panic attacks for what I thought was no reason. I couldn't explain it to myself. I knew because I kept telling him, when I'm with you, and being with you makes me feel like I am not myself anymore. It makes me feel like my true self, my identity, my being is being just erased. It felt like such a painful thing. It really was a painful thing. And despite having all of those things laid in front of me, all of those signs that clearly something was wrong, for some reason, it took me 2 years to understand that I was not in love, that I was not happy, and that I didn't want this relationship. And so obviously there was the emotional part, right? But there was also the asexuality part. So if you don't know, I'm asexual. I identify as gray asexual, which means for me that 99% of the time I do not feel sexual attraction. I can love people, I can find people extremely beautiful, I can have the most intense feelings for them, but I just never think of having sex with them. And most of the time, even the thought of that makes me really uncomfortable. And that's basically just it. But gray asexual because I think that it's not an absolute and definite thing. I do think it's fluctual. It fluctuates, and I do think it can, there can be one person, there can be one moment in my life. But like, I am definitely not a sexual person. And in that time with him, I felt like all physical contact was a source of intense pain. Like, psychologically, it was almost unbearable. And I know it sounds crazy to say because, this guy was just kind, honestly. He was friendly, everyone loved him, which made it even harder for me to understand and find my feelings valid. He was just kind. He didn't really do anything wrong to me, I guess, apart from just not recognizing that I was suffering and really not happy. And I'm not sure whether he wanted to ignore that or if he just didn't see it because he was young as well. So, and I gave, not to him, but to others, I gave this impression that I was happy, that I was in love, because it was such a failure to me that I basically created the relationship. Like, I basically made the relationship myself, if you know what I mean. It wasn't anything I wanted. The feelings were not there, but I wanted to create something around it. I wanted to create what I would have created in a happy relationship, because I felt like it was such a fail if that wasn't the case. So the asexuality thing was, I don't understand why I don't want to have sex with him. Like, it was just like, I don't understand why. I don't even think about it. Why is it something that I'm not, it's just not me. What is wrong with me? Because at that time, I didn't know I was asexual. I was 16 years old. It was like 10 years ago. Can you imagine? Even nowadays, asexuality is not talked about and even not recognized. So at that time, it was just like a mystery. And I thought, am I a lesbian? But I was attracted to girls and I found them beautiful and everything. But even imagining and trying to fantasize about it, I never felt like it was right. I never wanted to get sexual with a girl either. And so it was such like a difficult time for me because I felt so alone. Even I let myself down, if you know what I mean, by staying in this relationship for so long, by letting my friends' opinions, my parents' opinions, this guy's feelings be more important than the emptiness I felt, the pain I felt. I let myself down. And even nowadays, it's something I feel bad about and something I highly regret. And after 2 years, finally, I found the strength. I don't know why, I don't know how to end the relationship. And I felt such a relief after that. Such a relief. I can't even put into words the relief that I felt. It was like finally reuniting with myself. It was finally like getting back into my life, getting back into my body, getting back into my mind and being like, yes, I am me again. That's me. Thank you. Thanks God. And I was extremely happy. I felt like I was liberated from something, literally. And I know it sounds so cruel to say, but that's the truth. And what I'm gonna say after that is probably gonna sound even more cruel, but I feel like this experience was probably one of the most traumatizing things I have experienced. And I don't use this word lightly. Basically, after that, I had nightmares for years about this relationship. I had nightmares, and sometimes I would have flashbacks of things, and it just felt terrible. And I couldn't stand people mentioning his name. I couldn't stand people mentioning the relationship. And honestly, I mean, I'm not blaming my friends for doing that, but they didn't understand the pain. They didn't understand how bad I didn't want them to mention it, because I can't even explain properly why, but I just couldn't stand it and they kept doing it. And it was also very hard for me to deal with. I wished that people would forget it, because for me, it actually didn't mean anything. It wasn't me. Like those 2 years, I felt like it wasn't me. It wasn't something I had wanted to live, and to think that people would keep that in their mind and just not differentiate like between the me and the person that I tried to be, perhaps, or I don't really know, but the fact that for me it doesn't count. I shouldn't even have to say I was in a relationship, and I actually don't even think about it. I don't actually mention it because I wished it never happened. And the only times I actually felt understood was when I watched some lesbians on YouTube talk about how, even though they knew they were attracted to girls, they didn't really knew it clearly, and they tried going out and dating guys. And the feelings they expressed and the realization afterwards, and to be like, that was so obvious, how could I miss it? That's exactly how I felt after this relationship. I realized, gosh, nothing worked in that relationship. It wasn't someone I loved. It wasn't a relationship I wanted. It wasn't a communication I wanted. It wasn't, like, there was absolutely nothing in that moment of my life regarding that aspect of it that I felt okay with. And that was me. And it's something that I have been struggling with for the longest time. Unfortunately, I stopped therapy about a year, maybe a bit more than a year ago, because I didn't have time anymore and because of money issues. But before that, I was in therapy for 6 years. And when I went to therapy, I thought I was actually going to therapy because I couldn't go to school anymore, which was anxiety and depression. If you don't know, I went through a phase where I could not even go out. I couldn't leave the house. And I felt extremely low sometimes, to a point where, when dark thoughts come to mind. So I thought I was going to therapy to talk about that, and actually I discovered anxiety and all those things. But then I started talking about this relationship a lot, strangely, and I realized, oh gosh, it's been so many years and I'm still not, so many years. It's been like 3, 4, 5 years and I'm not done. I'm not like over it. And it's still a work in progress. And I feel like this past year, perhaps also, I feel better about it, I think. But it's still not necessarily very easy. And if you're wondering why I wanted to share these videos, because I'm someone now who's very sure of what I want, what I love, who I am, what I can do, what I can't do. I'm very confident in relationships. Like, I don't know how to explain this, but basically I'm very confident even in my asexuality, even in being a super hardcore feminist and man. I am okay with being attracted to women as well. I'm okay with being single perhaps forever. I mean, all of those things I'm like super okay with because I feel so connected with my true self. And I want you to know that it's not always been like that. I've actually been through those moments where I was in a relationship I didn't want to. And I want you to know that I didn't brush it off as soon as I ended the relationship. It's actually something that kept, haunting me for years, really. And I feel like perhaps, I mean, I am now a very independent person and a very critical thinker, and I've always been, and that's also why I can't understand how I could let myself do those things. But I also want to show you that despite being strong and critical thinker and independent, I went through that. And so if you go through that too, I mean, everyone sometimes is perhaps weak, perhaps fragile, perhaps unsure, perhaps confused. And if you... No, pas encore! And if you're sorry about that, I was talking to my mom. And if you're someone who is perhaps blaming yourself for something you've done to yourself, or a bad choice you've made, or a bad decision you've made, you're not alone, basically. And I wanted to share that with you. So yeah, I'm gonna stop now. I hope this was somehow interesting. I hope it was perhaps relatable and you got something out of this. I want to talk more about relationships and feelings and stuff like that because I actually have a few things to share, even though I'm not like someone who dates. But yeah. I hope you're doing super well. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to have more daily updates and if you want to support me financially, which would be amazing, but if you can't, no pressure. I have a Patreon page, and for $1 a month you have access to views and Q&As and posts and pictures and chats and everything, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye!